So we're here today to talk about how to digitize your to-do list strategically. Strategically is really the key component in what we're going to talk about today. I don't usually teach in this room, so if there are any issues with the webcast audio or anything, let me know. I think this microphone should be good for the, the webcast, but yeah, just let me know. And if the webcast audience has any questions, I will periodically jump out of the PowerPoint and check them. I'm going to do that real quick just to make sure things are up and running. It looks like it so far. So yeah, they're just, I'll get to them. There just might be a little bit of a delay. But yeah, my name is Ann Haag. I am the Practice Management Advisor here at the Chicago Bar Association. And we can go ahead and get started. So your to-do list should be a productivity tool, not just a list of things that you have yet to finish. A desire to digitize the list of things you need to accomplish is a starting point, but you need a strategy if you're really going to use these tools effectively. If you are somebody who just writes to-do items down on Post-it notes kind of chaotically as you go, and you start transferring that to a digital app, it might help you in some regards. But ultimately, if you're lacking that strategy, you're still not going to take as much advantage of these things as you would otherwise. The problem is that your average to-do list doesn't really provide you with a clear path to getting your tasks accomplished. It can be daunting if you don't build this in from the ground up. So I want to talk about some of the organizational strategies that you can employ to help with that. And for all of the things that we're going to talk about here in just a second, I'm not sure how effective it would be to use all of these. It's kind of like a pick and choose what works for you. If you do all of these, you might wind up kind of overwhelmed and it will undo the benefits of having a strategy. So just keep that in mind. Find a system that works for you and run with that. When you're overloaded with work, the tendency is to try to multitask. But this is rarely effective and usually only ends up dividing your attention, allowing you to accomplish only a little bit here and there. I'm sure we've all been there. Come on in, hi. Just be sure to check in with me afterwards so I get your credit and everything. The easiest way to overcome this problem is to focus all of your attention on just one task at a time. When you create your list, put your biggest priorities at the top, then rank your other tasks in order of importance. Designing your to-do list this way gives you a direct path from start to finish, eliminating the problem of figuring out what to do next and making it possible to focus. The obvious problem here is that you might be working with multiple lists of to-do items, maybe a list for every open matter. Some to-do apps allow you to have the best of both worlds here by allowing you to create many different lists, but assigning a priority tag or some kind of label to each task so that you can then filter those. So you're creating kind of like a master list from all of your different lists. You can filter them so that you can see tasks from every different list by priority or date. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into the actual platforms. Creating a schedule. This probably isn't a revelation, but finding the time to complete your tasks can be one of the biggest obstacles to getting things done. To beat this problem, you can start scheduling your tasks for each day, even if you can only focus on large projects a bit at a time. Take a look at your schedule and designate a specific block of time to spend on each task. Treat this time like any other appointment and only allow yourself to alter the plan if something extremely important comes up. During the block that you've scheduled for a task, focus only on getting that project done. If you feel like you're seriously lacking in available time, take advantage of the small parts of your day that are often just wasted. Taking 10 minutes to do one small piece of a project can keep you moving in the right direction. Try to schedule some of your tasks for the 5 minutes before a meeting starts or during your daily commute. You may be surprised at how much time you're able to free up. I'm going to jump out and look at questions really quickly. Okay, the audio seems to be fine. Thank you for that comment. I'm glad things are working well. All right. So the 1-3-5 rule. if you want to use this rule, you create a daily to-do list of only 9 items from across your various lists. You pick 1 big task that you definitely need to get done, 3 medium tasks, and 5 small tasks. Instead of trying to tackle a few big projects or fill your list with many small items, you'll be forcing yourself to focus on the tasks that you can realistically accomplish. So it's kind of like that priority view, except you're tailoring it a little bit more. Limiting your to-do list this way makes you feel capable of meeting all of your goals for the day. You're picking and choosing which tasks you'd like to do, so you don't have to feel pressured to take on additional projects. Sometimes when you're working from one giant list, you can feel kind of overwhelmed, and this just kind of breaks it into a piece that's a little bit more manageable. And I think it's like a psychological trick where we do better when we think that we're doing better. So if you make it smaller, you're gonna start feeling like you're getting more accomplished. Maybe start each week with a brainstorming session of everything you need to accomplish that week. Write down every single task that you can think of. Assigning weights to these tasks, then, is one strategy that can help you figure out your priorities so that the giant list starts to seem less overwhelming. To create a weighted task to-do list, you'll want to rate each of your tasks in 3 areas: seriousness, urgency, and growth. Seriousness describes how important the task is. Urgency depends on how soon the task is due. And growth stands for how quickly the problem will get worse if it isn't handled immediately. You give each of your tasks a 1 to 3 ranking for each category, with 3 being the highest. Then you tally up the rankings for each task so that you're left with a number between 1 and 9. Tasks with the highest number should be first on your to-do list, while those with a lower number can go last. If you have a tie between 2 or more tasks, use your own judgment to determine which should come first. I don't know that you necessarily have to do that with all of your tasks. I don't think you need to bring math into it. You certainly can if you like that strategy, but just adding those priority filters to the app that you choose to use, which we'll look at more when we actually look at the platforms. It can be a really effective way of getting a larger sense of that difference between urgency, seriousness, and growth. Which brings us to the Eisenhower method. This is related to the process that we just talked about, but it might be easier to employ on a daily basis. It's attributed to Eisenhower because of the following quote. He said, "I have 2 kinds of problems, the urgent and the important. The urgent are not important, and the important are never urgent." So it's kind of about separating those 2 things out. A lot of things that take up mental energy, waste time, and rarely move you toward your goals can easily be eliminated if you apply the Eisenhower principle. It's a simple decision-making tool that you can use right now. It's meant to help you question whether an action is really necessary. The idea of prioritizing tasks can be daunting, especially if you don't know where your priorities should lie. So this system creates a very simple grid to base your to-do list on, which you can see on the screen. You put tasks in the grid where they belong. So it's divided up into different categories. There's important and not important, and then urgent and not urgent. The important urgent quadrant, those tasks are done immediately and personally. So like crises, deadlines, problems. The important but not urgent quadrant gets an end date, those tasks, and they're done personally also. So like relationships, planning, recreation, exercise is an example. The third quadrant, which is unimportant but urgent, those tasks are typically delegated. So like interruptions, meetings, activities. And then the fourth quadrant, which is unimportant and not urgent, are dropped. So they're like time wasters, pleasant activities, trivia. You don't necessarily have to drop the pleasant things, the things that you enjoy doing, but it's just a way to give you that sense of priority and see what can probably be put to the side. And that we'll talk more about delegating in just a second. With the RD&D rule, So RDD means roll over, delegate, and drop. When you're busy, trying to achieve everything on your list can cause some serious stress. It's time to look at your list and be realistic. What should you roll over to tomorrow's list that you'll actually be able to achieve? Some things will still need to get done on the day, and you can't afford to roll them over, which is where delegation comes into play. You can delegate some of your list if you're in this position. If there are lots of little things sucking up your time, you can use it wisely and delegate. Finally, if you spend a lot of time rolling something over and you can't seem to get it done, sometimes you just need to drop it. Make sure that you're not dropping the biggest tasks on your to-do list, though, obviously. Those are the things that you need to make sure are at the top, but when it comes to the little inessential items, sometimes you can just forget about it. The key is having the gut instinct to know what's unnecessary before you even add it to your list. Keep track of completed tasks. This is the picture here is somebody giving herself a pat on the back. I think this is one of the main reasons that people like the physical, like paper to-do lists, because they can see all the items that they cross off. You get that satisfaction, whereas you don't necessarily have that with a digital app. Creating a done list not only gives you the same sense of achievement when you're able to look back on everything you did that day, but if you take a look at the list and realize that you really didn't accomplish anything, it's also a great wake-up call that you need to refocus and rethink what you're spending your day doing. So most of the apps that we'll talk about today, their default setting is that once you complete a task, it disappears. And you might like that simplicity. It's nice to not have things floating around. You might like how clean that is. But if you miss the satisfaction of seeing the crossed off items on your list, there's usually a setting that allows you to see them. So you can turn that on and off and give yourself a little pat on the back at the end of the day. So lastly, for the organizational strategy portion of this, only use one app. Download it, read up on the features, and commit a full month to using solely that app for your to-do list needs. You'll be shocked at how much more you'll be able to get done when you're not fidgeting with so many different things all the time. There have been a lot of studies done or like surveys, I guess is a better word, asking people how many apps they use for like project management, task management, and it's usually a lot. These are so much more effective if you just pick one and run with it. And that's not to say that you can't shop around. I think that committing that full month to using something is a good metric, because then you're really giving it time to you're learning it, you're committing to it. And then at the end of the month, you can assess whether or not you think it's a good fit. And then if it's not, you can always switch. You're not locked in, especially if you're not paying for something. We'll talk about the apps in just a minute, but a lot of them, I think most of the things that we're going to talk about today are free, but the ones that are not free have like paid versions or free trials. So you can also do that. And again, just really commit to it for that window, and then if you don't like it, scrap it, move on to the next thing. So all that being said, let's actually look at the apps. So when you're looking at these apps, there are some key components that you want to think about, thinking about how you work specifically, and this will be different for everyone, obviously. Collaboration, so how important is that to you? Do you really want to be able to share this app with an assistant or with other coworkers, or is this really just for you? Is it more of a personal to-do list? Do you want to include work to-do items and personal to-do items, or do you want to keep those things totally separate? I tend to like more of an integrated functionality just because it's everything in one place, and then you can share the work list where you need to, so you can kind of keep things separate. The second is templates. And again, this just has to do with probably the type of law that you practice or what you're specifically looking for from a to-do list. Task management platforms really thrive when you can get as repetitive as possible. So your workflows look fairly uniform throughout matter to matter. I was a patent paralegal before I came to the CBA, and that type of work really lent itself to an app like this because at least with like patent prosecution, your workflow for everything is going to look fairly uniform. And so it was very easy to create a template and then just duplicate that for every matter. And you'll have to change the dates and everything, but the to-do items are largely the same. Litigation would get a little bit more complicated where you didn't necessarily have those different uniform workflows. Things differed case by case. So, and we'll talk about options at the end if you think that this structure doesn't necessarily work for you. But it's a good idea before you start one of these apps to get a sense of what your workflow is like and to actually map it out if possible and to think about how that translates to a template. Upkeep, so who is actually going to be managing this account for the most part? Ideally, it's probably going to be you, but if you're creating something that you really want your assistant to manage, that's something to think about. The apps that we'll talk about today, they are designed to be pretty personal. And so they're like with Todoist, there's not, you can share lists, and we'll talk about this more in just a second. Oops, sorry. But you can share lists with people, you can share tasks with people, but there's not a way to like make your two screens look the same. They're still personal accounts. So there's not a real way, they're not designed to have like administrative controls or anything like that. So there's not a way to like force a view onto somebody. So that's something to think about also. And if you don't like that, then you might need to think about something a little bit more robust. And lastly, mobility, which is somewhere that all of these apps really shine because they're all designed to be uniform across devices. You can access the same lists on your phone as you can on your computer, etc. All right, so the first one that I want to actually talk about is Todoist. This is probably the most robust platform that we're going to talk about today. There are free and paid versions. You have the option of going with a premium account or a business account, which is designed for teams. I would argue if you are looking at Todoist for the business level or for the team level, you should probably just instead look at a project management platform, which we'll talk about more at the end. But the premium account has a lot going for it. And it's only $3 a month, so it's not a huge financial commitment. And free is really not a bad starting point. If you start using the free version and you hate it, you're probably not going to like the premium version. But if you, because they want people to upgrade with the free accounts, you'll notice pretty quickly what you can unlock with the premium version because you'll try to add like a comment or something and it'll say you have to upgrade for that. So you can, just by using it for a little bit, you can get a pretty good sense of what is going to be a better fit for you. You can create lists with tasks and subtasks, which you can see in the screenshot. These are obviously, the screenshots that I found are obviously not the most applicable for attorneys specifically, but I picked them because I think they give you a good sense of how you can organize things. So in this screenshot, this person has 3 different lists that they've created. There's the home, design, important, or actually those are labels, sorry. And they have the gardening list and the family list. And so they've given that design label to the update the family budget task. They've given the important label to water all indoor plants, and they've given the home label to prune the raspberry bushes. And so you can tell that by the color that's showing up on the to-do item. You can create subtasks, so you can see where the yard work task is like one parent task, and then it has all the different subtasks underneath it. You can assign due dates and time. You can actually assign times as well, so you can get pretty granular with it. You can then filter tasks using the today, inbox, and next 7-day views. So The inbox is just kind of a crash landing zone for all of your random to-do items. Then there's the Today tab, which will show you anything that you've tagged as being due that day. And then the next 7 days does the same thing, but more expansive. You can also filter the view by priority, so that's where the little filters tab is down at the bottom. You can assign like priority 1, priority 2, etc. You can also, with those filters, you can filter by tasks that are assigned to you or tasks that are assigned to other people. And I think there are a couple different options, but that's the gist of it. In the paid versions, so the premium and business levels, the one that we're looking at in the screenshot, I think, is one of the team accounts because they have that little team inbox. In the paid versions, you can add comments to tasks. So you could actually, for this one that says like family activities, if you clicked on that, you could add comments to it, and so people can interact. That's more ideal if you're collaborating with other people. You can also see an activity log that tracks all the changes made to a task, and you can add those labels. The labels, so the like color coding, home, design, and important labels that you're seeing in this screenshot, those are premium features. You cannot do that with the free account. I'm going to jump out real quick and see if we have questions. We do. All right. So somebody asked, do these apps sync automatically or manually between devices? Everything that we're going to talk about today syncs automatically between devices, but it works a little bit differently for each of those. Like Todoist is going to be tied to a Todoist account, so you can use that on an Android device or an iPhone or your computer. So it's like an independent app. And that's going to be different for the other ones that we'll talk about, which I'll touch on when we get there. Okay, so another person from the webcast asked, on Todoist, can you print hard copies of the lists? Yes, so you can print it just like you would a web page. I don't know that I've never tried that, so I can't promise like how well that looks or like how good it looks on a page. But yeah, you can print it just like I could print this Gmail page if I wanted to from a browser. All right. Let me jump back into the slides. So here is just a close-up view of what you get with the different versions. This is kind of a summary. You get more projects with each version, more people assigned to the projects. One big difference with premium is that you can set reminders. So with the free version, you can set like a due date and a due time, but you can't actually get like a notification sent to you when that's coming due. So really, the free version really only works in terms of like deadlines if you're monitoring it pretty closely. So I use Todoist personally, and I usually, anytime I'm at like my work or home computer, I have it pulled up in a browser. And so it's kind of always in the background and I'm paying attention to it. So that works for me. I don't have the premium version. But if you're somebody who would really benefit from those deadline notifications, premium is probably going to be worth it for that alone. Again, you can add comments, labels, and filters, although you get filters with the free version also. And you get a better look at like productivity trends, so you can get a sense of like when you get the most done. That can be helpful for analysis. One thing that I do want to note is that with Todoist, you retain all the rights to your data. When you sign up, you have to give them like an email. If you are being billed, you give them like a billing address and things like that. And so they store all of that information, but the rest is, it's not like visible to them. It's data that you own and that you can leave with if you end your account. So it's pretty secure. And they don't specify this on the website, but it's kind of like an unwritten rule with tech companies that if you pay versus using the free account, you're usually paying for better security. So that's just something to keep in mind. And this is just kind of for your own reference if you're thinking about Todoist. The column on the left with all the X's is the free account. The column on the right with all the green checks is what you get with the premium version. So just to keep that in mind. I think we covered all of this so far. So Todoist also, this is new. They have, or newer. They have a project template library now, and so you get access to that with premium. So again, I'm not so sure how well that will work for most attorneys because your workflow is so specific to you and the type of law that you practice. But it's available to you, the template library. All right, so the next, does anyone have any questions about Todoist before we move on?
The template is for both premiums?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So the template would be for both the team version and the premium version. All right. Okay, so somebody at home said that they tried printing a Todoist screen page, and it prints the right side, not the left-hand inbox side. So just something to think about if that printing functionality is important to you. All right. So Microsoft To Do is the next app that I want to talk about. This was formerly called Wunderlist. There were a lot, that was something that was popular with attorneys, I've noticed. I'd never used it. By the time I started working here, they had already been purchased by Microsoft. And so my supervisor at the time was like, don't bother getting set up with Wunderlist because it's going to go away. And I actually just got an email this past week that said Wunderlist is officially shutting down. And so if you used to use Wunderlist and you want to transfer over to To-Do, you got to do it. Your time is running out. And they said that they'll like help you with it and everything. I don't know much about what that entails, but just know that that's an option. There is no paid version of To-Do. It is only a free app. It does sync across your phone, desktop, laptop, etc., so long as you have a Microsoft account. So that is going to be the key there. Whereas with Todoist, you just install the Todoist app and log in on all those devices. With Microsoft, it's tied to that Microsoft account. So you have to log into that. And so it's just I think Microsoft apps can get confusing to people. So it's just like an Apple ID. So you just need to remember your information and be able to log in if you need to. So Microsoft To Do, it's very similar to Todoist, although it's a little bit less, it does a little bit less. I wrote down what the key takeaway is. There are the biggest one for me is that there are no subtasks with Microsoft To Do. So you can only have one level of task. I am somebody who works a lot with subtasks, so that would be kind of a deal breaker for me. To Do is now integrated with Outlook tasks. So in Outlook, there used to be a tab at the bottom where you would have like your mail, contacts, tasks, and calendar. That used to be called tasks, but now it's called To Do because they've been integrating this platform. It's very similar to the free version of Todoist, but it's a little bit more fun looking. You can do a lot more with like the layout and add colors and everything. So the one thing that it does offer that the free version of Todoist does not is that you can get reminders. So that's like a built-in thing to this in the free version, whereas you have to pay for that with Todoist. You can create lists to group your tasks, give them due dates and reminders. You can attach files to the task items, links or notes to them. So that's a little bit more expanded than the free version of Todoist also, because you can't add comments or notes or anything to a task. You can use emojis and lots of colors again. The My Day view allows you to tailor what you get done each day and uses smart suggestions to give you some ideas. You can so it's similar to that idea of Todoist where you set a deadline and then you can filter the view by day. Similar to that, except it gives you some like smart suggestions. You can share your lists with others and allow them to collaborate. So if you well, I mentioned that rule that was like the 1-3-5 rule, where you pick like the one thing that you have to get done and then a couple less important tasks. If that caught your eye, this could be a really good way to take advantage of that. That like my day view lends itself to that well. It also has smart lists. They're not folders, but they're an intelligent filter across your lists. You just have to look at important or planned tasks, regardless in which list they belong. So it's very similar to Todoist with the priority filters and the labels. So Microsoft To Do also syncs with tasks that you create in OneNote. You have to like specify that, but it can sync with that. So does anybody in the room use OneNote already? Okay, we've got one person. I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. Do you use to-do items in OneNote, just out of curiosity? No? Okay. So yeah, we'll bookmark that, and we'll talk about OneNote in just a minute. You can also set a task as recurring with detailed options for when it will be due again. You can also choose to get a reminder when the task is due or at any other time. And again, you can add notes and details about different tasks. So the key takeaway here, I think, is that you get the reminders, which is a plus, and you get a little bit more ability to like add information and files to your tasks, but there are no real tools for collaboration beyond just like sharing lists with people. And there are no subtasks, which again can be right out of the gate a deal breaker for people.
Does Todoist Premium have the recurring feature?
So the question from the audience was, does Todoist Premium have the recurring feature? Not that I know of. I didn't see that specified anywhere. So yeah, if you are somebody who has a lot of like recurring deadlines, this could be a good perk for you. All right. Apple Reminders is another one that I want to talk about. So this is not a bad free option for Apple users. It's very similar to the other things that we've talked about. It comes free, or I think it comes pre-installed on like iPhones and iPads and everything. So again, it syncs across all of your devices so long as they are Apple devices and you're logged in with the same Apple ID on each of them. So it's like, it syncs but with an asterisk. And that's another thing that I think people can get a little murky on their Apple ID and where it's being used and everything. So just something to keep in mind. But you can create reminders with subtasks and attachments and set alerts based on time and location. So for example, you get a reminder when you're getting into your car or arriving at a certain location, which is kind of interesting. You can set details like, you can also set a reminder to like, if you go to text somebody or like send them an iMessage, you can set a reminder to remind yourself to like say something to them. So the reminders get a little bit more detailed with this. You do have to have, in order for something like get a reminder when you're getting into your car or arriving at a certain location, you have to have location services enabled, which gets into some like privacy territory. So it comes at a price, I guess. So just something to be aware of. But it's a neat feature. You can also flag reminders or mark them as significant. So again, in the screenshot, you can see there's all the different lists that this person created. You can add lists, and then there are these 4 different quadrants up here where they have the today view, scheduled, which would be like the next 7-day feature in Todoist, all of your items in one place, and then flagged. So you can add like that sense of priority to things. So it's you give and take with all of these. I think that if you use Office 365, I think Microsoft To Do is probably an obvious place to start. If you are a Mac user and you really love using your Mac devices, I think Apple Reminders is not a bad place to start. I think Todoist overall is probably, if you're somebody who's using like a PC at work, a Mac at home, and you have an Android device, so you have a lot of different moving parts, I think Todoist is a good place to start because you can kind of bridge all of those gaps. You can also add notes or a URL to reminders in Apple Reminders. And where attachments are concerned, you can take a new photo, choose an image from your photo library, or scan a document and attach it to a to-do item. All right, let me see if we have any questions. So somebody from online asked, does To-Do integrate with Outlook? Yes, it does. So if you add a task using your desktop version of Outlook, it'll show up in your To-Do account if they are using the same Microsoft account. All right. Okay, somebody, a Todoist user said, yes, you can set recurring tasks in Todoist. Set a task to every Monday, for example. All right, so I'm assuming that's probably a premium feature, but it is, the capability is there. Did you have a question?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What was the one thing that Microsoft To Do can't do that you didn't like?
Microsoft To Do, the one thing that they cannot do is that they do not use subtasks. So yeah, that to me, just with the way that my brain works and the way I like to organize things, I would have a hard time with that. Mm-hmm.
I don't have Office 365. Can I still use the Microsoft To Do?
Yes.
app?
So the question in the room was, I do not use Office 365. Can I still use Microsoft To Do? Yes, you can. To Do is actually a free app through Microsoft. So if you don't use anything else with Microsoft, you can create a Microsoft account just to use To Do, and it's free. So yeah, you don't have to be doing anything else with Microsoft in order to use it. I just think that if you are like very comfortable with the way that Microsoft works, and if you like if you're using Office 365, it integrates well with the other programs. So if you really like 365 or your other Microsoft apps, it seems like a logical starting point to me. But no, you don't have to be using Microsoft or like paying for a Microsoft account or anything in order to use it. All right, any other questions in the room? All right, looks good. So the last one that I want to mention is Microsoft OneNote. I don't necessarily recommend using this as a standalone task management app, but if you are already really good about using OneNote and you use it for all of your like note-taking needs, it's not a bad thing to use. It is not. It is nowhere near as like robust as these other apps that we've talked about. Basically, you can add to-do items into your notes pages. So if you are, it's a good like case-by-case scenario where like if you are sending an assistant a page of notes that you took and you have to-do items that are specific to stuff that you talked about in that page of notes, it can be good for that. But again, you can't set, I don't think, and this might be, OneNote's changing all the time, and I think that it's one of the newer Microsoft programs relatively, and so I think it will get more and more robust as time goes by. But so all of this is changing and it might get outdated quickly, but you can't do subtasks, you can't filter things in quite as much detail as you can with these other apps. But again, if you're already using it, it's not a bad thing to think about. So if none of these apps that we've talked today are quite cutting it, it might be time to think about a project management app instead of a task management app. Project management apps are going to be a better fit for large and complex projects, whereas a task management app is better geared towards repetitive or personal projects. Project management apps help with task management, but also allow you to monitor, measure, and control projects. So they're all going to be different, and I believe, so the ones that I mentioned on this slide are Asana, Basecamp, and Trello. I believe all of those have free versions. I use Asana, and I use the free version, but they also all have paid versions that do a lot more. But and they're going to be different for everyone, but some of the core offerings with these programs is task management, so you can create, schedule, and assign tasks to project members set milestones, and track task completion. Team collaboration, so you can use online workspaces where team members can comment on tasks, view each other's calendars, chat, and collaborate easily. Document storage and sharing, so you can build a centralized repository of important project files and track version changes on documents. Project and task planning, so you can set project goals and outline deliverables using built-in tools like charts, and you can chart like the progress of projects. And then lastly, reporting. So to understand the project status, track costs, and assess team performance on reporting dashboards that consist of charts, graphs, activity streams, etc. So they do a lot more. So if you are kind of hitting a wall with a task management platform, and especially if collaboration is really central to what you do, you might want to explore one of these before you get really invested in a task management app and just get frustrated with the shortcomings. So that is just something to think about. All right, that brings me to the end of the slides. We do have a few questions from online. So somebody asked at some point to please talk about syncing to-do apps with calendars. So you can't, I think with the premium version of Todoist, there is a sync functionality. I have not tested that out, so I don't really know how thorough that is. With Microsoft Tasks, if you are using the Outlook calendar, there's some sync there. But these syncs are not like totally cohesive. They're not perfect integrations. If you really want that kind of calendar level integration, I think a project management app is going to be better, because then you can have like team calendars and really you just have much more capability there. All right. All right, so the last question we have from online was about sync functionality these apps may have with timekeeping programs. So that's a good point. I think that is going to have to come, that's something to explore on the end of the timekeeping program. I think that the flow would be opposite there. So the timekeeping program is going to have an integration with the app that you're looking at, not vice versa, because there are so many timekeeping programs out there. And these apps that we talked about today are not by any means explicitly for lawyers. So timekeeping isn't really something that they build in. But if you are using a timekeeping program, it's definitely possible. Especially, I would say you have better odds with the Microsoft program, because Microsoft is like the business program, and so they might be more inclined to have an app or have an integration ready to go. All right, lastly, somebody asked, what about Google Calendar? I'm assuming that they mean the task functionality with Google Calendar. So with Google Calendar, Google Calendar is like primarily a calendaring program, but you have the ability to add tasks and reminders to the calendar. I think it kind of just depends on how you work. Like, if you are a very calendar-based program or a person, you use your calendar quite a bit, and tasks are more of like an afterthought. I think that's a good way to go, because the calendar gets priority and you can add tasks, but it's not, Google Calendar is not a task management program. It is, that is kind of like an additional feature of it. It doesn't have the like standalone functionality of the things that we talked about today. All right, there's a follow-up to that. Okay, yeah, so I hope that cleared that up. If you have any other questions, you can email me. I forgot to include my contact information. Oh, we have one question.
With the Apple, if you're using a non-Apple product at work, can you sign into your Apple account and use that, or no?
So this person asked, with the Apple Reminders program, are you able, if if you have an Apple ID but you're using a PC at work, can you sign in to your Apple Reminders account? The app, I believe, is iOS only, or OS only. So you, in order to actually get into the app, you have to be using an Apple device. You might be able to log into the cloud and launch it through a browser, but I would guess that the functionality is not 100%. So you might be able to access it and just like use it in a really minimal way, but yeah, you're not going to have the whole app functionality. All right, any other questions? Oh, we have one from online. All right, never mind. Okay, I think we are good to go. If anyone has any questions, I'm sorry I forgot to include that last slide with my contact information, but my email is ahaag, so AHAAG, at chicagobar.org. And my phone number is 312-554-2059. And I'm always happy to talk to you about these things. I like to hear about how lawyers use these programs. So if you find one that you either really love or really hate, I would love to hear about it and why. So yeah, please feel free to reach out. All right, thank you.
Thank you.